You know, I'm kind of an old man. I know. I have this handsome face and these dashing good looks and this slick beard with no gray in it and whatnot. But I'm kind of getting up there, man. And I'll tell you what, in 43 years on this earth, 43 years, I have never once heard a single criticism of Marxism that's actually been about Marxism. Now, maybe that sounds silly to you since this is, the USA and we're sort of pelted with criticisms of Marxism 24/7, right? Almost like there's like somebody up on the roof, right? Like some college kids throwing water balloons in an 80s movie and we got to dodge them in order to get to the malt shop or the record store or whatever it is kids used to do in 80s movies, right? But I'm being 100% serious here. Every every single so-called criticism of Marxism that I've ever heard begins with completely ignoring what Marxism is and launching into the most, pompous critiques of silly nonsense that has nothing to do with Marxism that I've ever heard. And every single one of these people who do this, they give the game away with their very first statement. They have never bothered looking into the subject. The same subject that they've dedicated so much time and energy to hating, to bringing it into like who they are or who they think they are as a person. How is it that we become so easily duped as a people? How is it that people who claim they are skeptical of the mainstream media, right? People who claim that they're skeptical of what they're told can believe it without question when it allows them to feel superior in some way. If you've ever noticed this, it's not just on the subject of Marxism, right? It's on everything and from all sides. And this even has the reverse superiority manipulation from the, pro not Marxist, but calling it Marxist side, right? All the Radlib anti-communists, the Trogers and wizards and whatnot, right? They're manipulated in this same way. It's the same sort of woke liberalism that they think Marxism is, but instead of hating it and looking down on it for being stupid, they say, no, this is awesome. And everyone who doesn't believe everything I learned in, Gender Studies 3, or from whatever my friend on Discord told me that Lenin said, they're stupid and they're evil. And all of it avoids the one main factor that they all should have been investigating in the first place. That is the substance here, the content of the subject we're putting under the label actually true? Is this what Marxism is? It's kind of like, okay, picture a box, right? Any kind of box you want, a fancy box, a cardboard box, whatever, just a box. Or maybe not just a box. Picture a box, but with a lid, right? And inside this box with a lid is Marxism. It's everything that adds up to the worldview that we call Marxism-Leninism. There's dialectical logic in there and the materialist standpoint, overcoming idealism. Engels talking about how Kant's a noble thing in itself becomes a thing for us when theoretical knowledge is applied to the real material world and we make things for ourselves. That's in there too, right? The entire worldview that Marx lays out in the entire process of all 3 volumes of Capital, of necessity and contradiction, of the logic of matter and not just the matter of logic. If we want to use an old phrase from Marx, all that is in there. And Lenin is in there too, right? We can't forget Lenin. He's in there talking about how it's impossible to understand Marx and Capital without first understanding Hegel's logic. And he's applying the same methods that Marx applied in Capital to the development of imperialism, right? And he's, waging the October Revolution and all that good stuff. We can even be in there too, right? If you want, understanding things through their necessity and development rather than abstracting characteristics away from the thing we're studying and freezing those characteristics in time and space, then, comparing those abstract characteristics to each other That's what we can be doing in there. Also, we can be fighting wizards, of course. Basically, everything Marxism is, that's what's in this box, right? Based around the worldview of Marxism. That's what we got here. And there's a big label stuck on top of that box, right? And it says Marxism on it, right? In big red letters, because red's awesome. And I made the box anyway, so you're going to get my color choice, which is red and usually red. Now, I want you to picture a second box sitting right next to it, right? This other box, this is called modern bourgeois ideology or liberalism, wokeism, whatever you want, right? It's your imagination. And it's a ratty old box. It's full of incorrect notions and abstracting those characteristics of things away from them, freezing them in time and space. And there's sort of comparisons of those characteristics to the other ones that we get from doing the same thing to try to figure out what things are. Vulgar metaphysics, right, is what I'm trying to say. And also mistakes of idealism and dogmatic thinking. There's DEI workshops in there and silly things like progressive stacks and privilege walks. There's standpoint epistemology in there, hyper-individualism, middle-class social chauvinism, all the notions that divide people up by the lines, by lines that the ruling class has given us, right? And try to maintain them. It's modern liberal bourgeois ideology, right? Now, we have these two boxes next to each other. Somehow, over the last period of history in which there was no left wing in America to, defend our Marxism box, somebody switched the labels on these boxes, cough, cough, ruling class, right? While nobody was looking. Suddenly, everyone who wanted to break out of the impossible situation they're in, when they start looking for ways to do it, they get bombarded by the contents of our bourgeois ideology box. Those 80s movie college kids are just like whipping them at them, right? Whipping them at people from way up on the roof so they can't even, hit back. Before, they go and commit sexual assault or whatever else it is that kids in 80s movies or college kids in 80s movies do, which, by the way, was really effing common in those movies, like a scary amount, seriously, which is a whole nother bag of bananas. And maybe we should talk about that next Monday. Anyway, excuse me, all of these bourgeois notions get thrown at innocent people, but from the box called Marxism, right? Because someone switched the labels. And so all these people who've been identifying with them because the real world is sort of unavoidable, right? They see Marxism and the victories speak for themselves. And so these people, they take this box, right, that actually has bourgeois ideology in it, and they begin decorating it and loving it, right? Making it their own, drawing little hammers and sickles on it and putting all their favorite slogans on it, right? Like a girl in high school writing Mrs. So-and-so in her notebook, right? About the boy she has a crush on, But with our box full of liberal bourgeois ideology that says Marxism on it. Now, fast forward a few years, right? And we're in 2024 America. And this box, the one with the stupid hammers and sickles drawn on it, and the wizards guarding it, and all the metaphysics and liberalism inside. Now, this is the one that sort of people criticize as Marxism because they basically just see the label, right? And all the lovingly embellished additions it has on its outside. And they never even think to open the box. People who like this box, right? People who don't like this box, doesn't matter. All they do is look at the outer appearance. They never open the box to even see if there's actually any Marxism in there. So people who say they're Marxists, they just espouse all this bourgeois ideology thinking it's Marxism. And people who say they hate Marxism, they just hate modern bourgeois ideology. And I mean, who can blame them for it, right? It's only when they actually open the boxes that they find out someone's messed with the labels, and that the one decorated with all of the symbols of Marxism is precisely built to combat Marxism. And straight up, that's just stupid. It's a very, very, very stupid. What's up, everybody? Welcome to Noah's Show. I'm Noah, as you may or may not have picked up on by now. With me, as always, is the best producer I've ever met in my life, Mr. Daniel Gutierrez, who will be taking your calls and putting you through and all that good stuff. What's up, Daniel?
Everything's good. Just trucking, keeping on trucking, just moving on down the line, just like plowing through ACP readings, keeping up with all of the craziness around the election and this fake democracy that we have. I mean, it's endless, but it's all a good time.
It is something of a good time, I guess. Frankly, like, it's funny to me that the ruling class gets like insane about elections, like real insane every time the end of October and November rolls around, and then they forget about them for a few years, you know? And like, let's be real, no matter who wins this election, our lives are not going to change based on that outcome. You know, like, no matter what, the ruling class is going to keep destroying this country. And so for me, it's like, I've actually been thinking about doing a live stream during the elections of me trying to eat 2 large pizzas, because I think that would be more entertaining than watching these like Wolf Blitzer and whoever go back and forth about states and who wins this BS non-democracy, you know?
That's hilarious. Please don't do that to yourself. I certainly don't want to. I don't want to have to hear about you ending up in the hospital
By visiting me for having a heart attack.
Please, no. But
what happened to Noah? Really, he tried to eat 2 large pizzas and died.
It'd just be like very anticlimactic.
It would.
Yeah. But yeah, you know, it's terrible. It's funny to see some of these so-called communist parties that are actually you know, engaging with this charade and lending it legitimacy. It's really it's really, I mean, it shows really why an organization like ACP was so necessary, actually.
No kidding. It's wild to me that, like, if you look at the old party, the liquidated party now, that, like, it's saying literally the exact same things it was saying 30 years ago. This is the most important bourgeois election of our lifetime. This time we have to vote against fascism, and then we can go back to fighting capitalism after we help capitalism. Like, it makes no sense. Like, at what point do people stop believing them? That every election is somehow the most important, and this, you know, politician who's the same as the rest is somehow secretly a fascist and worse than all the others.
Yeah, no, I mean, I mean, Lenin was, you know, he already went through all this stuff. I mean, it's right opportunism. You know, you got the left opportunists who are sectarian and they refuse to engage in any coalition building. And then you got the right opportunists that basically launder bourgeois democracy for the ruling class. So, you know, where do you stand?
100%. And we stand directly on the Stalin line, brother, or what people call the Golden Stalinist Center these days, or the Golden Parenti Center. What's up, Golden Parenti? I see him in the chat there. Yeah, and it brings up something I wanted to talk about before we get into the show tonight with you. Did you have a chance to listen to the Twitter space that Eddie and Haas did with ACP detractors? Was it yesterday they did that?
Yeah, that was last night. Everybody should really go on Twitter and check that out.
Yeah.
very, very interesting. I mean, it was interesting because there was like a range of kind of critiques. So you kind of had like almost like the what do you call it? It was like the almost like the Peanuts gallery of like ACP haters and detractors. But it was really good because I think what you actually realize is that none of these people actually are that serious.
And they have no idea what they're talking about. Like, and this is something I'm complaining about constantly, right? People that, and this is first. So let me kind of set the scene. There's a woman who is literally saying she's going to kill ACP members for being quote unquote fascists, right? And joking about making kill lists, which is crazy. And then when it comes time to sort of, explain why she thinks this, why she wants to kill us for being fascist, it turns out that she has no idea whatsoever what Marxism Leninism is or why it's Marxism Leninism, right? And the very basic book that Haas brings up that explains the revolutionary potential of the peasantry and what the process of proletarianization creates in the decline of middle classes, etc. She straight up lies about it. And she's like, no, I read that. I just forget. I mean, it's ridiculous. They're not, and Paperwind has it right in the chat. Here, hold on. Let me bring this up. Oz was right when he told them that they're MLs because they want friends. And that's something else I'm always complaining about. Look, subcultures exist, right? Friend groups all exist. But people need to stop trying to treat class struggle, which is a serious thing about all of society, as their subculture, right? We do this and that, and that's what's cool, because it's incredibly damaging to the actual class struggle. These people are so up their own asses that they're literally threatening to kill communists, right? Turning themselves into something very similar to actual fascists, lumpenized sort of ideological vanguards of the ruling class in their sort of effort to maintain loyalty to the dogmas they're not allowed to question within the subculture. What do you think, Daniel?
No, I think that's 100% correct. I mean, it's they are, it's part of it is like an addiction to like the likes and the retweets and all the bots that boost this in the algorithm, all the anti-communism in the algorithm. But yeah, it's largely the sort of the effect of alienation and people's mental health issues, which none of us want to. Obviously, we want everybody to be taken care of, and we want everybody to be healed from whatever issues that they're dealing with. But some of these people they're spreading they're spreading really horrendous sort of like smears. They're calling us fascists. I mean, this is beyond the pale. This is there's real fascists and there's real neo-Nazis running around, and these people spend all of their time trying to make us look bad, and it's not going to end well for these people because they're only discrediting themselves and making them look like just completely unserious reactionary people.
Couldn't agree more. And it's like, look, if someone thinks the class character of fascism is petty bourgeois, though I would argue that they don't understand what that means, that's fine. We can sort of discuss that, right? But know that what you're saying is Trotskyism, right? That's straight out of Trotsky, who was a literal Nazi collaborator, who tried to collaborate with not just the Nazis, but the German or the Japanese fascists in order to bring down the Soviet Union during the war against fascism. So, like, it gets that sort of abstract and removed from the real world. And when you don't actually look into where what you're saying comes from, you end up siding with the ruling class on accident, because who are they actually attacking, right? They're attacking the American reproletariat, right? The people who are reproletarianizing and falling out of the middle classes. Now, certain sectors of this specifically is what got brought up, farmers, right? And who are they actually materially aligned against? The big banks, finance capital, right? And the giant agri corporations, like that we can sort of there's like two cartels that meet, but Monsanto is generally used as a stand-in for them because they're the biggest. So it's like when you attack people just trying to sort of get by and not be in debt to these giant financial institutions that exist to proliferate this debt, you're automatically putting yourself on the side of the ruling class, and you're therefore an anti-communist.
Yeah, it's utterly ridiculous, and it's funny because it doesn't even really matter. Like, even if we have this conversation, which we did, and I think the evidence speaks for itself. And even with all of that sort of presented and laid out for an audience, and everybody can go back and listen to the recording and can see exactly what our position is on these issues, they don't care, because the truth doesn't matter. The facts don't matter to these people. So take that into consideration when you see the types of smears that are being used against our party. Facts don't matter to these people. They have no interest in engaging with the historical record or any of the theoretical basis on which we base our party positions. And our platform speaks for itself. Take a look at it. It tells you everything you need to know about how serious we are and how much we've thought through these particular questions. And I think history will be the judge. History will be the judge as to who was the reactionary and who actually stood on the side of progress.
I couldn't agree more. Look, results at the end of the day are what matter, right? And it's just tragic to me that while in conversation, it becomes very clear how little they know. And then the one was actually kind of nice. So, like, cool. But then directly afterwards, it becomes this massive performance of pretending you know about things you don't again. Which, if you're any sort of communist, or communist aspirant, needs to be beneath you, because you need the truth. And here's the thing about people that sort of believe that, just by changing the words we use, change the thing itself, right? Not only did Engels sort of ridicule that back in the day, right? Like, completely ridiculed it and tore it to shreds. And you can even see a short version of it in his pamphlet against anarchists called On Authority. But all it does is reveal that you're nothing but a wizard. You're trying to cast a magic spell, and ain't no wizards allowed around here.
High Sheriff Hazard is a hard man to be. High Sheriff is his only plan. He digs through pockets, takes what he can, for he's High Sheriff Hazard. He caught me one evening, and here's what he said: "You look like a Russian, you look like a red, and if you're fond of your skin and your head, beware the ain't got nothing to fear. We throw the old bastard right out on his ear. Farewell to High Sheriff Hazard.
Pavel, do you mind if we
All
start
right,
the show?
what's up, internet? I'm ready to get started. Are you guys ready to get started? I feel like tonight's going to be a good night. We got some great calls lined up for you. I almost didn't mute Daniel through this end, but I caught it because looks like I'm actually on the ball for a change, which is rare. You know me, I kind of don't get on the ball at all. I'm usually too focused on slaying wizards or getting a sword or whatever it is I need to do. By the way, before we do get started, you know, one other thing I want to bring up is whatever happened to heists, man. Like sometimes I look at, like, think about like Lenin and Stalin, like straight up robbing banks, right? The Bolsheviks robbed banks. They got to do heists. In our era, heists are just impossible. Like, how cool would it be if I just got to like sit in a van, right, and like go through my earpiece and be like, all right, 3 feet to your right, there's going to be a security grid. I'm going to unlock it now and hack the mainframe, right? I want to hack a mainframe, but apparently our tech team tells us that's impossible and a stupid thing from movies that doesn't actually exist. You don't just run around hacking mainframes. Who knew? I don't know. Obviously not me. Who do we have first, Daniel?
Hey, Noah, we've got Pavel, our man out in Austria.
Awesome. What's up, Pavel? It's great to have you. Always a pleasure to have you call the show, brother.
Always a pleasure to talk to you, Noah, and my ACP comrades. Even if I just started a few months ago, my journey towards Marxism and started reading only a few weeks ago. So yeah.
Well, that's all you need, brother.
I have a few questions here from US occupied Europe. The first one would be, how did you actually find people with whom to organize to start basically groundwork? Because like I told you in a previous call, I tried to organize with the local communist parties here, but they were like, they suffered under the purity fetish. So I did not see any point in even trying to pursue this. So how do I even start to find people?
That is the $1 million question, you know? How do you find people to even begin things with? And there's a few routes that I think are good and sort of adapted to our modern times. And the first, honestly, is the internet. I can tell you, oh, you're in Austria, not Germany. I don't know any Austrians. But if you,
I have, however, German nationality.
Well, there you go. Well, if you sort of, if you talk to anyone within our international department, they may be able to point you in the direction of some good people. Tell you what, I'm writing a note to myself to ask Chris, who is the director of our entire international wing of the party, what groups in Austria we're hooked up with, if any, and I will get that information to you for the next time you call, and we'll have that. But finding people yourself, I mean, a lot of the time, the sort of so-called communist or left-wing parties are like the children of Eurocommunism and revisionism, and just sort of betraying everything that Marxism stands for. They're parties like Die Linke in Germany.
They're hopeless.
Completely hopeless. However, there are people like you that join it thinking they're real. There were a lot of people in the old party here that they're what brought the legitimate infrastructure of that party to its reconstitution in the new one. So there's that. but also just on the internet in general, right? Begin talking to like-minded people, and just say like, "Hey, I'm from Austria. Do you guys know anyone around here? Do you have any that kind of thing?" Like networking through that way, I think would be a very good use of your time. And
Any
also,
forum you would suggest?
yeah, go ahead.
Any forum you would suggest? Any platform you would suggest where I could start looking around?
Start in the Midwestern Marks and infrared discords on Twitter.
Okay,
Um,
okay. The infrared Discord, I did not join it yet, but maybe yeah, I will do so. Yeah.
excellent. Yeah, definitely check there. Um, and then just sort of getting active in your community outside of established political bounds, right? Like I'm very big on neighborhood and community organizing. Like my sort of our neighborhood committee that oversees a lot of the projects for our neighborhood, it has people from all types of political traditions within it, and we all get together to do things for our neighborhood specifically. Uh, and that's the way you meet people. The PTA is another one, and the school board, right? Getting involved with you, if you have kids, uh, the way that kind of stuff is structured. Um, Anything like that. That's kind of where I live. I love stuff like that, and it's the way to sort of show people organically what a communist really is. So then all the like, mythology and lies spread by the ruling class, you don't even have to say like, yo, I'm a communist. You just kind of embody it and show people. You know what I mean? They get debunked that way, the lies, that is. Sorry.
Yeah, I get it. Probably I will have to start joining community meetings in the small village I'm living in. I
Yes,
mean, people
perfect.
in Austria are very conservative, but maybe there are. I don't think all people are lost here completely, but yeah.
Frankly, I don't know if Austrian conservatives are like American conservatives, but in general, because of the sort of changing class dynamics in America, they're almost always more open-minded than liberals are. And I know that can seem counterintuitive sometimes.
No, I believe you.
Well, there
No,
you
I
go
believe
then.
you. I mean, I believe you. I mean, come on. I found in the pro-Palestinian protest I was involved in, Palestinian was almost me too.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
This is fucking ridiculous. So yeah,
That's
I'm
that's what they do. That's the purity fetish you were talking about, right? It
yeah.
doesn't. It's just like we don't have to go on a whole big thing about it, but yeah,
No, we don't have to. I will just proceed now to my second question. I mean, what I encountered also in online discourse and also by just listening around what people are telling, they have this weird perception about Marxist communism, about Marxism and communism, and yeah, they confuse real Marxist people who want to make their communities actually better with these weird cultural Marxist. Where does this shit comes from? I mean, cultural Marxist as a word does not even make sense.
um, yeah. So that's a longer answer, but it's interesting. And those are the boxes, right, that I talked about in the opening. It's flipping them up. Now, the so-called cultural Marxists. This begins with a specific program that the CIA puts on, right, called the Congress for Cultural Freedom. And there's a couple other programs attached to it, but this is one of the main ones where they begin funding, and not just the CIA, but bourgeois sort of foundations and NGOs like the Rockefeller Foundation's a big one, the Ford Foundation's another. Um, Things like in from Germany, the Frankfurt School. Now these people called
Yeah,
themselves
I heard the name already. Yeah, I heard the name
exactly.
already. Yeah.
So they called themselves culturalists, right? And tried to draw from Marxism while abandoning the primary premises of Marxism. right? Which is that social reproduction happens at the level of its basic necessity. And in the capitalist era, that becomes generalized commodity production and exchange, right? How that goes about being done and reproduced. This reproduces society overall and sort of characterizes the different facets of society, for lack of a better word. Now, the cultural Marxists, right, like sort of thought themselves into such a twisted up knot of pretzely sort of philosophy that they believed in culture being the site of social reproduction and therefore change, right? And so
Yeah,
they abandoned
it
Marxism.
does not make
but,
sense.
No, go ahead.
On its face, it doesn't make sense.
Correct. No, and it's
Yeah.
anti-communist through and through and anti-Marxist. Paperwin says it's kind of like a cross-dressing Marxism. Yeah, kind of. But it's like,
Yeah, okay.
it sort of dresses itself up in Marxist language. And then you have organizations like the CIA massively promoting this stuff, right? Massively promoting it, putting millions and millions of dollars into it in order to create
Yeah.
what CIA whistleblower Thomas Braden, who worked on the project, called a compatible left, a left that wouldn't seek the overthrow of the bourgeois class, right?
That's
That
what
would
we have in
align
Europe here.
exactly, that would
Yeah.
align against every single communist country. And this was also the Frankfurt School. And one of my favorite examples is one of their guys that they say is actually one of the better ones, Herbert Marcuse. He's not better. He's just as bad. If you look at his like magnum opus book, it's called One Dimensional Man, right? And he has some good sort of criticisms of consumerist culture and stuff like that. But there's never an alternative. The alternative is even worse in their eyes, meaning all it is a backhanded support of capitalism. And if you look at the acknowledgments page of that book, there's Rockefeller Foundation fellows, CIA brass.
Very Marxist.
Exactly. This guy went on to found the anti-communist department at Columbia University, an Ivy League school. They called it Sovietology, but it was the anti-communism department, right? So this is actually the way the labels on the boxes I mentioned got switched, basically.
Why does it not surprise me that again the CIA was again involved in some kind of bullshitty operation? Or yeah, okay. We probably could make a bingo out of the different CIA operations which fucked up the left in Europe and in the US beyond redemption.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
So
yeah,
if you're looking for a really good overview of how this looks, a couple years ago we did an interview with a guy who he's done a lot of new research on the subject, Freedom of Information Act stuff. So look for our interview about the CIA and the Congress for Cultural Freedom with a guy named Gabriel Rockhill. It's on our channel.
Okay, Gabriel Rockhill. Okay.
Yep.
Yeah.
I mean, some of his work I don't really agree with, but that's okay. On this subject, he's very, very good.
I mean, I don't agree probably with the opinions of for example Douglas McGregor when it comes on his politics, but for sure he provides an excellent analysis of military operations. So yeah.
Yes, he does. Absolutely.
Yeah. So
thank you very much.
So
no, go ahead.
I have one last, and then I'm away.
Sure.
Basically, how do I not lose hope here in Europe? I mean, I feel quite alone currently because I do not have anybody to organize with, and everybody here in the fucking West, or the majority, is asleep. They buy into the Western propaganda. They buy into social democracy, while it's completely let everybody down here. That I do not see any future for Europe as long as the fucking European Union exists, sad as it is to say. And after the US have blown up the Nord Stream pipeline and the idiotic idea to start a trade war with China. So I really don't see any future prospects here. I really think that first the US government as it is has to go, because as long as it exists, the European Union will exist as its fucking poodles.
Well, let me say this. A few years ago, maybe 7, 8 years ago, I felt like you did in the US. Everyone I would meet was a fake Marxist. I saw no hope. No, it was maybe a little longer than that, because what really brought me back into things, thinking things could change, was the Trump and Bernie phenomenon. That they got people excited and believing the change was possible again. And since then, it's a long uphill struggle, but history, brother, is on our side. So there are always going to be crises created in capitalism, and these crises, they create opportunity for communists to point out what causes them and to push society forward. And each one that happens, the crisis caused right now by the EU basically getting cucked to the US government, especially Germany, after the US government blew up Nord Stream, is going to be a sort of rallying cry for the people. If you guys can figure out how to use it as such. And maybe that one will pass you by. Maybe it won't, but it can be a starting point. It can be where you and other Austrians go, what is going on here? You know what I mean? And that's the only thing you really need at first is, what is going on here? Why can't we have a peaceful life?
Not only that, I mean, the media are so disingenuous that basically they are making the question, how come the energy prices did rise up? Yeah, how did it happen? I don't know. Are they really expecting people to be so stupid? I think people are so stupid currently. I think they are buying the shit while not realizing, if you cut off the major energy supply to Europe, which does not have its own natural resources, how do you expect to keep energy costs affordable? How?
You don't. And I think people, look, here's the thing. People don't learn political lessons by being told them. We have to sort of experience the crises for ourselves. This is what's happened in the US. It's what happened in Germany that led to the establishment of East Germany and the GDR. Lessons have to be learned by the people as they go through them. And so the job of the communist becomes to explain things as they're happening and point to the way out. And that is sort of the way to keep your eye on the prize. Look, I'd love to keep going, but we got a bunch more calls to get through. So
it's fine. I would love to talk to you longer, Noah, but you have still other guests. Would you be maybe too open to have a separate call sometimes? Because I love speaking with you.
Absolutely, brother. Absolutely. Take care, and we will see you next time. I think.
See you.
Thanks. I think that the international situation right now is so tied up with each national reality that it's no longer a sort of question of which is primary, in the international or national reality. We're now at a point where the interpenetration of these two and their mutual determination is almost complete, right? Look at what's been happening to the U.S. ruling class as the power index grows, right? It's been declining. these are very, very linked to how they need to crack down on dissidents here. But that's a whole nother bag of bananas. Who do we have next, Daniel?
You
Hey Noah. Hey Noah. Oh,
you have to remove
sorry.
me from the chat.
Yeah. Good night, Pavel. Take care. Hey Noah, we've got Orange. Orange is going to fill us in a little bit on what's going on in the Sudan, and then maybe you could help give us some of the broader geopolitical context on it. I think we're going to learn a little bit about what's happening on the ground right now from Orange.
Awesome, absolutely. So the Sudan is an area I don't know a lot about, so I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah.
What's up, Orange?
Yeah. Hi. I'm doing good. How are you?
I'm good. You are extremely loud, just so you know.
Oof. See if I can like.
It's all good. Don't worry about it. It's fine. I
All right.
got you. I got you.
Yeah.
There we go. You're good.
Yeah. Sorry, I'm like.
Oh, that's too quiet now.
Really
See,
bad
I'm
with technology right now. So.
All right, we're good.
Yeah.
Go for it. Go for it, Orange.
Yep. Usually it's hard for me to find like where to start. I guess I'll start with like the war itself, which is between the army of the country, the one that's been there since independence, and this militia, which is the RSF. So the war started in April of 2023, I believe. 2023. Sorry, I get mixed up with like 2022 and 2023. It all melted in my brain. But
that happens.
Yeah. But the war started in April when some RSF's militiamen shot at the army in the capital after some disagreements about how to regularize the militia into the army. Because after the revolution, which I don't know if I'll get into too much, basically the idea was that this country can't have two armies in it, right? And there needs to be some way to organize this, like integrate this militia into the regular army.
You know what? You know what's kind of interesting? That is very similar to how the U.S. developed a standing army. Because at the beginning of the whole idea for the U.S. To sort of stop a tyrannical central government from arising was to keep the military in militia form. Now, obviously, this didn't happen. Our entire Second Amendment, though, was written in order to help enshrine militias. And what's really interesting, though, is right now they're attacking the Second Amendment specifically at the point of militias, which I find interesting as sort of the legitimacy of the central government crumbles as they're nearing tighter and tighter crises. This is when they do that. But I am interrupting you. Go ahead with Sudan.
Yeah, I should mention probably that this militia in Sudan is probably not like the militias in the U.S. or in for instance, France or wherever else. It's not like People's Militia. This militia is like just to go into the origins, in 2003 in Darfur, which is the western region, it's about the size of France. It's there was a rebellion there. People there were saying that there's no development in the region. This rebellion was like a large tent rebellion. It involved secularists, Islamists, etc., etc. And the central government was already busy in the south because of the civil war. And their army had failed to fight there, so they went and they funded local Arab militias, and that's where the Darfur genocide comes from, because these militias would go and commit those sorts of acts against civilians while putting down the rebellion.
A very sad fact of a phenomenon like that. That happens
Oh,
more often than people think.
Yeah, it happened in the South too, and to my knowledge, they're still dealing with militias down in South Sudan. But I'd have to check. I'm not quite sure. Uh, but my the uh, sorry if I'm like saying too much. It's kind of jumbled in my brain.
No, it's all right. It's all right.
Um,
It's fine. I'm sure
yeah,
the audience is learning quite a bit, so we're good.
yeah. So this RSF, to give some, I guess, international background, they went when the UAE and Saudis they were fighting in Yemen against the Houthis.
Mhm.
They went as like paid mercenaries against the Houthis.
That I think
With
that
the
frames things a lot
Mhm.
better for people.
Huh?
I think that may frame things a lot better for people that don't know a lot
Yeah,
about Sudan, because the Houthis are
yeah,
sort of a known entity.
yeah. And they've also fought in Libya, even though I imagine the details of the Libyan civil war are less known generally because I don't see it talked about as much.
Yeah, well, not these days, not since the
Yeah,
quote unquote gas attack, right?
yeah, not since the U.S. intervention.
Hmm.
But they have very close ties with the UAE. There's a company that's run by one of the relatives of the leader of the RSF. Uh, the leader of the RSF, his name is Mohammed Hamdan Dagalo. His nickname is Hameti. Most of the time, you'll see him referred to as Hameti.
Okay.
Uh, I think his brother runs a company called El Junaid. Uh, it started, to my knowledge, as a gold company because after we lost our oil, which was in South Sudan,
Hmm.
the next year we discovered gold in Darfur. And the year after that was the year of the RSF. Those militias became regularized and given titles as the RSF because they ended up controlling that gold, and they have a company. That company, its bank account is in the UAE.
Okay, so
Uh,
let me ask you a question about the RSF, because this is actually something I don't know a lot about at all. So
yeah.
who is actually funding the RSF at this point in time? Like, as they're trying
Yeah.
to sort of officialize it into the
Uh,
military, I assume it still had funding, or was this sort of gold
it
company its primary funding?
it's being funded by the UAE. They
Okay.
send weapons and planes and medical supplies and so on through a town in Chad, which is about 1,000 miles or so, like something crazy. It's very far from where the actual refugee camp
Hmm.
that the UAE claims it's supporting is. Uh, and there's been UAE passports in the capital, and we found like UAE weapons. There's plenty of evidence that the UAE is the main backing behind the
Okay,
RSF.
I gotcha.
Yeah. And recently, a couple months ago, Joe Biden said that the UAE was a major defensive partner in the region in East Africa, which is where Sudan is. We're
Hmm.
just south of Egypt, in the Middle East, and in the Indian Ocean. The UAE is also the uh, part of the sort of land bridge to Israel to get resources into Israel.
Ah, okay. This is beginning
Yeah,
to come into focus now.
yeah. Uh, so the UAE is the main backing behind the RSF
Hmm.
right now. Um, and I think I saw somewhere if the UAE, I'm convinced personally, but I also saw, I don't remember where I saw it. If the UAE were to stop funding the RSF would collapse tomorrow. Most of their Sudanese, that nowadays they have to get mercenaries from outside of Sudan, from Chad, from Libya, even as far as Mali, to actually have fighters in Sudan because their Sudanese fighters are like dying off.
Man.
Yeah. Uh, and this is a militia that's so it's to the US. 5 US congressmen went and sent a letter to get Joe Biden to pressure the UAE to stop funding them. And the US has sanctions on the RSF and on the army, even though the US was never a major supporter of the direct supporter of the RSF.
Hmm. Okay, so I think that's a good amount of background info. So, in the actual struggle between the RSF and the military, what's going on right now? What can you help us understand?
To my knowledge, the RSF has, I think, about half of Darfur and Kordofan, and it's sort of like it'd be easier to pull up a map, but it's like they have like this path leading to the capital from the west of the
Okay.
country. But recently there was a offensive from the army which took major portions of the capital, and one of the senior commanders of the RSF defected to the army.
Oh man.
And he was in Al Jazeera State, which is where there's an irrigation system, which is about the size of the Netherlands, I think, one of the largest in the world, which he controlled, and he just defected to the army.
So that's a big deal.
Yeah, it is. Even though when I talk about it, like a lot of people were celebrating when the army did that offensive, even though the people I'm close to, like my family and so on, when I talk to them about it, they're like, the war is still happening though.
Well, yeah, but I mean,
Yeah.
that's kind of like saying like Stalingrad, like it was like you're like, dude, Stalingrad, like the Soviets won, and they're like, yeah, but the war's still happening. Like, okay, but well, what do you think of this? You know?
Yeah. So I mean, the comparison I usually make to describe it is like picking between the Japanese Empire and Chiang Kai-shek, where Chiang Kai-shek in isolation is not good and so on. But the Imperial Japanese, like they slaughtered millions out of just like sadism,
Mhm.
you know?
Very true. That's a
There's
very
no
good parallel.
comparison. Yeah. There's no comparison between the two. I'm not a big like supporter of the army, but like in this war, there's no parallel whatsoever, in my opinion. Especially when you get into the sorts of war crimes that the RSF commits.
I don't doubt it. I don't doubt it, brother.
Yeah.
I mean, I like I said, I know very little about this. Which, by the way, thank you for coming in and giving us this overview. I loved it. But I mean, it's almost par for the course at this point in time to expect that kind of thing from the sort of forces that we can say become proxies of empire in some larger sense, you know?
The thing that's like shocking though is how little coverage there is. Like I talk with people, most people I know don't actually know much about it, even though it's, as far as like scale, this is the biggest humanitarian crisis in the world right now. Sudan is about the size of Alaska, I guess, for comparison, and it had a population of like 50 million people. And right now 11 million people are displaced.
Jesus.
Yeah, there's famine across the country. There's various diseases like cholera, malaria, and so on, which are spreading because of poor sanitation. The aid, only like a third of what OSHA had projected was necessary, has actually been funded.
Typical.
It's an extremely dire situation. And I'm convinced the official death counts say that I think a few thousand people have died. I'm honestly, I believe it's way higher than that.
Mhm.
I saw a projection a couple months ago saying that by September 2 to 4 million people could starve, and
Jesus.
September has passed.
Yeah, September is like a month past at this point. Well,
Yeah.
tell you what, brother. Everyone here who prays will be praying for them, I'm sure. I'm gonna. I frankly, like, with how busy I am, it's hard for me to keep up on things like this, but it's important. And your calls inspired me to learn more about it myself. So for that, I thank you sincerely, because Lisa, it's important to know these things and understand what's actually happening and what, if anything, there is
Yeah.
that we can do to help.
Yeah. And as far as I guess the U.S. is relevant, because I mean, we're Americans, so it's if the I'd assume that Americans would be interested in how America itself is relevant,
Right.
you know.
Well, also we tend
So
to make everything about ourselves, so
yeah. The U.S. has been pushing for negotiations between these two,
okay.
which the army has not participated in, but the RSF has participated in Geneva.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Do you know why that is?
The army says that there's no place for the RSF in the country.
Fair enough.
And they say that these should be classified as terrorists and separatists and so on. They should not be like, they're not a group that we like should be in negotiation with. I think it's interesting if you compare it to how the U.S. reacted to Ukraine or Iraq or so on. If Russia had done like even one fraction, not even a fraction of what the RSF does to civilians, we would never hear the end of it. It would actually be like everywhere.
Of course.
Yeah. I mean, these soldiers can like burn down a whole village, and they'll take a video of it like proudly and just like post it on Facebook or wherever they have their like social media.
It's disgusting, man. I mean, they do the same thing with the Zionists, right?
Yeah.
So I mean, and this isn't a new phenomenon either. They were doing this with the worst Nazi animals and anti-humans that they just brought into the US and, you know, kept them within the state machine. It's a whole nother bag of bananas, but it's sad and typical, and just another reason why that entire class has negated its right to leadership of this country. But look, brother, we got other calls, and we got to move along.
Yeah.
But I really appreciate this. I always love learning new stuff. And you've inspired me, like I said, to learn more about this topic. So thank you so much for your call. And I hope you call back another time, because I'd love to learn more.
Yeah, I hope I can call back soon.
Excellent. Take care, brother. Thank you again.
Yeah, you too. See ya.
But okay, so I want to, like, I don't know. Maybe I should. I was gonna sort of address like the situation with like the African continent overall, I think, was a secondary issue in the last period of history, but is becoming really primary in the 21st century. And I think we're gonna see over time its importance increase, right? I don't want to get into a whole big thing, because it'll take explaining why that is, but I just want to make you all aware, and maybe we'll talk about this next week or something, that there is a reason for sort of media blackouts about Africa right now. and its geopolitical importance. Anyway, moving. Who do we have next, Mr.? It doesn't help if you're muted. I can't hear you.
Very funny. We've got Fred the Glorious, Fred the Monarchist, who wants to talk about alternatives to Marxism.
Alternatives to Marxism.
Okay, we can do alternatives to Marxism, no problem. But here's the thing: we're gonna have to know what you believe Marxism is first.
My idea of Marxism is very from what I know about it. Like
Right.
the reason I
Kinda
came
basic.
to West, like, huh?
Kind of like just basic, like I refer to it as basic vagaries in my head. Like I know Marxist theory inside and out, right? But about the postmodern tradition, I know only basic vagaries. Like I've read a little bit, I pick things up here and there. I'm not familiar with the tradition though.
Right.
Is that a good description?
I'm kind of vague on Marxism.
Okay.
Like, the reason I came to like Midwestern Marx is to get books on
Well, there
Marx,
you go.
so I can understand it better.
Ain't nothing wrong with that, brother. Okay, so let me explain just in general the way we use the language, because it's not. We basically hold that the way these words are used in mainstream society is wrong, and it comes to us through purposeful falsification. So when we say Marxism, what we mean is a scientific worldview that has developed what we call a more thorough and correctly reflective of reality system of logic itself. So we say that formal logic is obsolete, and what we need instead is dialectical logic. And not just dialectical logic, but dialectical logic that is stripped of an idealist sort of mystifying shell and put on a materialist foundation. So basically, what we're trying to do with Marxism is understand the world around us according to how things develop. And we believe it's using that development as a premise that gives us a deeper understanding of what they are, and therefore ways to participate in change.
Okay, thanks for the okay. Let me clear my throat. The reason I say vague, because I know some parts of it, like I know it has something to do with like class and what was it? Materialism and stuff. Like material conditions and that kind of stuff, I think.
For sure.
And like a science to it, I think.
Yeah. We say that the worldview is scientific. It's a scientific mode of thought. So one of my favorite Marxist thinkers, if it wouldn't become too much of a mouthful to just keep adding names, like we say Marxism, Leninism, I would be calling myself a Marxist, Leninist, Ilyankovist, Du Boisite, right? But this guy, Ivo, but you just can't say that. It's silly. But this guy, Ivo Ilyankov, he puts us into a really good sort of framing for people, where he says that he's not ashamed to admit that as a thinker, he has a very abstract and vague sort of understanding of the atom, right? Like the atom is based on electrons and neutrons, right? But it is not every scientist that has a concept of the concept. So the thing that allows you to think of these atoms properly and concretely and based in how they actually exist in society takes a scientific way of thinking itself. And this is what we call Marxism or Marxism-Leninism, basically. And a lot of the time that gets mixed up with being a communist, wanting
Uh,
to have
I thought
socialism, etc.
Marxist-Leninism had something to do with like combining elements of like Marxism with like the ideas of Lenin.
For sure, yes. What we say is that so Lenin was the Marxist of his day, right? And it
Yeah,
took the development of society.
like pre-Lenin, it was like the idea that like the class like revolution, like the proletariat can only there can only be like a revolution in an already industrialized nation.
That was the leading sort of guess, yes. But from the Marxist perspective, those sort of questions are always open ended. And Marx himself actually disagreed with such a notion. Towards the end of his life, he writes letters to these Russian revolutionaries, right? Interesting, there was
Right.
and Lenin had no idea these letters even existed. And he's talking about how the peasant social consciousness, the social consciousness specifically created by the peasant communes in Russia, was wholly able to produce socialism. So basically, Leninism overcomes incorrect notions within Marxism that led to a mistake that we call stagism, which was the Menshevik position, right? That society has to go from A to B to C, when actually, as the Soviet Union proves, it can go right from A to C.
Right.
So that's basically like the reason we add Leninism.
Like, can you send me a link to that so I can read that?
A link to what?
About what you were saying about near Marx's end of his life.
Oh, those letters?
Finding out about.
Yeah. I'm sure if someone in the chat knows the letter I'm exactly referring to, because I don't even remember the name. They were only recently published, is a thing. And it's in a collection, and I'm terrible at remembering those. They're all literally just on my bookshelf. Like I don't generally keep links, but if someone has them, put them in the chat for our man here, and
I'm
someone
sure
will
it was
have
like very, like I'm sure it was very awkward with like Lenin talking about how the revolution could start in like Russia, and then like the Orthodox Marxists are like, it's impossible,
right?
And then
as
these
they're
letters
doing
come
it,
out, and it completely destroys Orthodox Marxism.
Exactly. What's funny to me always, and like I'll even sometimes refer to myself as an Orthodox Marxism or Marxist, but that's only in reference to like more heterodox Marxists, like the Institute. Me, Carlos, Eddie, we're more Orthodox versus Infrared, who are more heterodox, right? It's still all Marxism, Leninism, but the way we arrive at answers is slightly different, is all. But the way they used Orthodox back in the day was very dogmatic and not properly reflective of actual Marxist analysis. And Kautsky himself used to castigate people for doing that. And then he turned into that, which is really interesting. And Lenin tears him to shreds in this book called The Proletarian Revolution and the Renegade Kautsky. Now, Kautsky was like the leader of Marxism of the day, right? As the Bolsheviks were becoming a thing and pulling away from the Second International. And Lenin writes this book and just sets him on fire, brother. There's a whole chapter about how he explains how Kautsky turns Marx into a common liberal. It's a great book. I highly recommend it. Anyway, we got up on a huge tear there. Did you have a question or what do you want to do?
Yeah, like what's the Marxist view on like an alternative to both like communism and liberal capitalism?
Oh, that's okay. That's a good question. So
I believe in like corporatism, you see?
Okay.
Where, class collaboration, and that like the nation state is like a body, right?
Okay.
And if everything in the nation state is not working, it could collapse or die. Right?
If everything in the
you're
nation state is not working, what happens? I missed it.
it dies and rots away or rots away inside while dying.
Okay. Well, I would put it to you that everything within the bourgeois mode of life is already doing that. That
Yeah,
it's already
like
creating.
today you're seeing it with the like the liberal capitalist notion. Like we're at a stage now where it's just like capitalism is just destroying everything
Mhm.
with
That's
this
what.
like individualistic idea
Right.
that you can be this and it's
Okay,
crazy.
I see what you're saying. Yeah, and I agree with you that liberal bourgeois society is unsustainable. So what happens?
It's at a stage where it is unsustainable.
Correct, and it goes through these crises, right? And when it is at a stage when it gets unsustainable, this is when change must happen. Now, the alignment of forces that are actually material within society is always the people versus the ruling class. The ruling class of capitalist society exists at the expense of the freedom and stability of the people, right? Of the working classes, right? And this is why we're
Yeah.
seeing the death of the middle classes right now in what I call reproletarianization. It can no longer prop up a stable middle. It's impossible, especially when we had things like our money becoming fake, the globalization of industry and financialization of the nation, all that kind of stuff. Now, there's two directions we can go. We can either have the ruling class continually clamp down on us and get more authoritarian in order to sort of
to keep that like coming like have you read Italian Elite Theory?
have I read what kind of theory?
Italian Elite Theory.
Are you talking about like Gentile and the the sort
no,
of
not Gentile. Italian Elite Theory. It's the idea that the elites are the ones that guide everything, and without like a counter elite, like movements generally collapse mostly.
you'd have to give me some
Like
names
it
because I'm
kind of
not
like
familiar with the
disproves
term.
the populist idea.
Oh, so it's like
like
an anti-populism.
yeah.
Okay, well, fine. I mean, that's fine if that's what you want to think, but in history, that's never really happened. Now, that's not that to say that leaders don't exist, right? But what has always happened that's actually brought society forward has been not just like centered in a ruling class versus a working class, but an entire mode of production, a way of reproducing society no longer being able to survive and something new having to come into existence, right? This happens in regards to the sort of revolutions against feudal absolutism, the 1776 revolution, all that kind of stuff. And then it begins happening again with the proletarian revolutions of the 20th century. What we see in fascism is the reverse of this. We see the bourgeoisie and the sort of embryonic financial bourgeoisie forced to go to extremes against the rise of the proletariat. Now, after World War II and the alignment of forces, this begins to sort of enter this period of what they used to call détente, right? But we're coming to a point now where imperialism itself and American sort of hegemony within this
but also
has become impossible. I'm sorry?
Like take for France, for example. Even though they don't control their colonies like like as they used to. They still hold on to them financially and over their resources.
Sure. The US does too. What I'm
Yep.
saying is this is becoming impossible to sustain. What happens? So here's the way the Marxists view financialization and what imperialism actually is, right?
Right.
What we view it as monopolization, right? Creates this
Right.
new layered system of the way capital works. And the way capital works is essential to understand for understanding the reproduction of society, because everything within society is characterized by this process of capital becoming a thing and accumulating, right? In
Right.
Lenin's day, he explains how bank capital, right, lending and usury, etc., merges with industrial capital to create this new higher layer. He calls this finance capital. Now, in the
Right.
interwar period, right, between World Wars I and II, the US government itself, because it has accumulated most of the world's gold reserves, and our money back then was still a commodity, it becomes a financial
Oh
capitalist,
yeah.
right? And so
Like
the real
money
hold on,
was
let me
inflated
finish, brother.
printing out.
Let me finish. The real cause of World War II is within this development of finance capital, right? So the US is forcing the Western allies from World War I to pay back war debts that it does not have the industrial base to pay back, forcing them to, one, begin going on a war footing again, and two, and plotting against the US and the threat of the Soviet Union to the east, which is really a big deal. And then two, it forces them to force Germany to pay back war debts or reparations from the war, right? And this
Yeah.
creates this interesting triangle of financialization and compounding interest from the US. They would give a loan to Germany. Germany would use that loan in order to pay war reparations to the Western
Yeah,
allies, who
I
would
know
then
the
use
thing
that
with the
to
dog
pay
land.
the US, who would then make another loan to Germany, and around and around and around it went, right? This puts the Nazi party in a position to come into being rather than some airy-fairy ideas they had or scapegoating or anything. That's the material reality behind fascism. That's why we say
Yeah,
it is
and
the
not
last
only that,
defense of
but most
brother. You got to let me finish.
yeah.
That's why we
Right,
say
sorry, man.
it's the last defense of finance capital, right? Because that's precisely what it was behind everything when we peel back all the curtains, right? That's what causes that form of social reproduction. Go ahead.
Yeah, it's not just like that, but also like the left in Germany were just like so divided that they didn't even pay attention to the rise of the Nazi.
I
Which
don't know.
after World War II, they learned from that mistake. You know, that's when the Socialist Unity Party was born out of
I don't know if
that
they didn't.
the working class cannot, be divided.
Yeah, I see what you're saying. Yeah, that you're right that the parties that were on the so-called left failed, right? And Dimitrov writes about this, and he sort of explains the errors in theory that led to their failures in tactics, which was, frankly, they couldn't connect the class struggle existing with the sort of national realities within Germany. In fact, and they let the Nazi party define what it meant to be German. And this really helped in their rhetoric. And here's the thing. The Nazi party was always the party of finance capital, right? It wasn't, yes, they had some like lefty sounding rhetoric, whatever. They believed that they were the real socialists, and all the Marxists and communists could never produce socialism, right? because the way
yeah,
they use
because
socialism,
there was socialism outside of Marx,
well, what they said was
like
that,
bourgeoisie socialism, for example.
well, what they said was that class struggle was not objective, which it is, right? If any look at history shows us this, right? And that the only way to quote unquote socialize or produce a society that serves society itself is for all of the classes to work together and know their place. So if you're an aristocrat who was funding them along with the industrialists like Krupp and Tyson, industrialists from the US like Ford, etc., then you sit on your ass, you get rich off everybody else's labor, and you serve the nation that way. If you're a proletarian, then you go to work, you send your kids to work, etc., and you serve the nation that way. That's the way they sort of use the language to avoid the objectivity of class struggle and denied the sort of real world, for lack of a better word.
Yeah.
All right. You got anything else for us tonight? I want to move. We got about 20 minutes left, and I don't want to be rude to any other
Okay.
callers.
Mostly, well, I haven't really said really too much. Yeah, what do you think about me being a monarchist? Like,
I think you
like, do
are.
you consider me like a class enemy or something? Or
No,
just like,
no, man. I think you are free to believe in whatever you want.
right?
There's this sort of misconception that develops around the last period of history in the US that that sort of social change happens when everybody thinks the same thing. That's not how
Yeah.
social change happens. It's a real objective process, right? The communists seek to participate in and fulfill the historical role of the working class. So if you want to, believe you can bring back monarchy, I wish you all the best. I'm not convinced, right? I don't think it's reasonable or possible. Now we can argue on the merit of that, but at the end of the day, that's setting up a sort of utopian vision for the future, and it's outside of. I'm sorry, Daniel's making me laugh.
Yeah, like I had my bad experience with like leftists and like
I bet.
communists because they're always like the one shouting at me,
Right.
why are you this? Why are you they called me a fascist, even though I despise fascism to the core.
Hey, I agree with you there, brother. Look, here's the thing. The last period of American history had no left wing. We had a bunch of liberals under a bunch of misconceptions. We're only now beginning to build a real left wing politics in this country. And we insist on being professional. We insist on rallying the working class. And we insist on not looking down on people. And that's all that those sort of middle class liberals who pretended to be communists would do. Right. So,
yeah, like you've noticed that a lot of these liberals say they're for the working class. Meanwhile, when they don't want to even interact with a working, a hardworking American.
No, of course not. And most of them have soft hands, and they're in the like sort of
snowflake.
Definitely snowflakes. Absolutely. They're in that sort of college campus activist atmosphere.
Yeah.
Where
I never went to college. I just, after high school, I got my GED and became a truck driver. So
there you go. Good for you, brother. It's a debt trap. I mean, like, look, don't get me wrong. It can be handy to have those pieces of paper people buy from the bank. But at the end of the day, that's what you're doing, buying a piece of paper from the bank. The chat is cracking me up. But I appreciate the call, brother. This has been fun. We're going to move on because we only have a little bit of time left.
Yeah, I was going to go anyway because I have to get ready for work tomorrow.
Great. Well, I
Um,
wish you a good
Good to
night at
talk
work,
to you.
brother. Take care, and we will see you next time. It's funny to me that, look, I can talk to anyone, man. And if you're a communist, you should be able to talk to anyone too. And over time, you should be able to convince them why communism is for them if they're working class. Because at the end of the day, that's all it's about. American communism is government of, by, and for the people. And this is why the liberals who pretend to be on the left, who pretend to be Marxist, and who pretend to be communist, but then when they actually talk to us, always turn out to know nothing about what they're talking about, like who Daniel and I were talking about in the intro. This is why they hate us, right? Because we can talk to people, we can convince them, and we don't just try to yell at them to make ourselves feel better about ourselves, because we don't need that. Anyway, Daniel, my brother, who do we have next?
Hey, Noah, we got Corvus in the house.
Chorus.
Corvus.
What's up, Chorus?
Oh, Corvus, but thank you.
Corvus.
Hello.
Hey, how you doing? It's good to talk to you.
Hey, it's going all right. How's your day going?
My day is almost over, but it went very well. Thank you for asking. What's up? What
Yes.
can we talk about tonight?
Well, you just got done talking to a corporatist, and my question is coincidentally kind of related to that that idea of an alternative to both communism and capitalism. It is more like it's not so much like is there an alternative? It's more like what we can learn from those alternatives to both. Like what can we learn from corporatism, like he was a corporatist? What can we learn from something like distributism, which is emphasizes solidarity and subsidiarity, or like Georgism, which has a land value tax, or mutualism? Go ahead.
Well, here's the thing. In the real world, in the process of social development, I don't think there's such a thing as an alternative to communism. The only alternative, according to the way Marx and Engels would put it, is the mutual dissolution of the classes, right? That
Right.
communism is simply the next stage of society, being the next stage, and the working class bringing it about. Now, what characteristics this has, what it looks like, etc., we can pull all sorts of things from wherever we want, but at the end of the day, it is the necessity that drives that forward. And the actions we take can't be based on sort of abstract ideals or ideas pulled from utopianism, but instead in a correct analysis of the material conditions as they exist, which lead us to our avenues of opportunity, right? Or what I call sort of the different possible roads we can walk down. Now, for this to happen, there are certain general things that have to be going on, right? The working class has to be taking power as the working class. But as we see from sort of people like the Chinese, the best Chinese thinkers study everyone. Lenin studied everyone, right? Marx, Engels, they all studied everyone. So I would say pull from everything. But remember that Marxist analysis needs to be the defining thing of how we see the world, and it's sort of progress into something new. So if you can pull some cool stuff out of distributionism, that's fine. Just remember that the Marxist worldview is the way to properly reflect concrete reality in its development.
Okay. I was just wondering if like a let's say well that's probably a bit of a utopian question, but I was still wondering if there are pragmatic policies from those various other models that could be pulled into a like Marxist Leninist, say if they took power or something,
Right.
they would be used into those tools of economic policy could be used to further the Marxist-Leninist cause.
Yeah, I get you. So let me give an example. Fascist corporatism, right, is this idea
Right.
that we can take from the area, the realm of our minds, and sort of superimpose a new relation of production onto what already exists, right? But what already exists is already there. We can't just make one from scratch. In the economic problems of socialism in USSR, Stalin explains this, that the laws of social development are like natural, like the laws of the universe, right? That's what they are. That, and he puts it into terms for water in a river, right? Now, we can redirect the river, right? We can put a dam in there and build a hydroelectric power plant. What we can't do is stop the river, the water in the river from flowing, and do something else altogether instead, right? We need to work with what we have and make it work for us rather than believing that we can do something completely from without, which is why the so-called class collaboration was just fascism was just masked class struggle on behalf of the ruling elites. That's all it ever was, right? And the working class of those nations found that out real quick, you know?
Right. Yeah, and I'm not a corporatist, just so you know, or any of those other things. I'm just
I know.
saying,
I've seen your chats in our Discord, and you seem great, brother. Don't worry. I'm not gonna think you're like some weird. Yeah, don't worry. But I appreciate the questions; they're interesting. I'll leave you with this. Lenin, in his speeches to the youth leagues, what he really liked to focus on was combating the development of dogmas, right? And he says that basically, if all we read is communist stuff, we're not going to be a very good communist. And if all we do is memorize conclusions and then try to show off, which is what a lot of early Soviet students did, we're not going to be a communist at all. He says that we should drink from the fountain of knowledge of mankind, meaning that, yes, Hegel sort of tears bits of Aristotle to shreds, right? But that doesn't mean there's nothing of value in Aristotle for us, right? And Marx and Engels, they sort of tear Hegel to shreds at times, but that doesn't mean there's nothing of value in Hegel for us. In fact, those two thinkers are precisely necessary for the development of Marxism into what it becomes. I mean, if you read Capital, Marx is quoting Aristotle left and right for a reason. And he sort of brings up some of the limitations of Aristotle because of the lack of development of society in his time and place for the same reason.
right. I remember that that was one of the readings in the Carlos's class on that recently ended, the Marxist the Lenin's Youth League, Communist Youth League.
Oh, cool. Yeah, that's a great one.
Yeah, it was. But yes, that is a good point, because we got to be flexible, not, like you said, dogmatic.
Precisely.
Yeah.
Flexible, dynamic. We need to be, look, Marxism is a worldview and a way to understand reality that we think is deeper than any to date. So we should be able to read whatever we want and put it through that filter of Marxism, you know? That's the way I look at it. Some of my favorite things I've read have been non-Marxist. Have you ever read Martin Luther King Jr.'s writing?
I think I've read a couple of his speeches before a while back.
They are brilliant. And he wasn't a Marxist, right? He was actually, believe it or not, a Hegelian thinker. You know, like at the time, there was quite a bit more white chauvinism than there is now. So people sort of reduced him to an activist, but he was so much more. This was a revolutionary leader of world-changing stature, brother. We are all in 2024 the children of Martin Luther King Jr.
Yes. Yes.
I don't
Nice.
know. I would suggest let me get I have two collections. Let me look for one for you. Hold on.
Okay.
So all of his collected essays are in a book called A Testament of Hope. If you're
Testament of
interested
Hope.
in reading King, check that one out. It's awesome. I love it. He goes into the development of nonviolence in the Black freedom struggle and why it comes about at that particular time. And he develops his concept of nonviolence dialectically. It's absolutely brilliant, man. You got to read it. So good.
Yes, sir. Testament of Hope, right?
Testament of Hope. Absolutely.
Thank you.
My pleasure,
All right,
brother.
I think that's the only question I had. I did come on last week with the question in mind, but I don't think you were prepared for it or something. But I'll give it. I guess I gave it to Daniel, and he said he'd give it to you as a question,
Okay,
and he'll get
I
back with
still
me.
may not be prepared because I've been so busy with party work lately. Whew. But go
Yeah.
ahead.
He I don't think you've heard it yet, but it was concerning the history of the arts in Soviet Union and the at least supposedly persecution of the artist
Yeah,
of some
the
artists, certain artists.
suppression of the second run of avant-garde. Look, the guy to answer that question straight up is Haas.
Okay,
Haas has deeply studied Soviet art. I have like a sort of cursory knowledge of it just because Soviet socialist realism became like sort of a big deal in my house when I was young. So like I know a little about it, but art has never really been my thing. So I just
gotcha.
it's never interested me enough to look into, unfortunately. Sorry, brother.
Daniel did give me a book to look into, which luckily I found some copy somewhere, and so one of the people in the chat also gave me something to look into as well. But
Perfect.
if I ever come across Haas, I'll ask him. Maybe he'll have a stream, and I'll ask him on a stream or something. Who knows?
Awesome. There you go, brother. Thank you. And yeah, like he's I know Carlos has looked a bit into it too. But I believe Haas is like really deeply looked into their art and aesthetics and all that good stuff.
All right.
Now, if you want
That's all I
Soviet
had to.
movie recommendations, I know those.
Oh yeah, like Sergei Eisenstein.
Yeah. What I really so a lot of people like the early like groundbreaking cinematography, Battleship Potemkin and stuff like that. I actually like their later stuff during the like late Soviet Union because the interesting character of the hollowing out of Marxism in the late Soviet Union produces this interesting sarcasm in everyone. Like Soviet film of the day, Soviet music of the day, Soviet comedy of the day was this really dry and self-deprecating sarcasm that I love. And my favorite movie from the period is called Moscow Does Not Allow Tears. And it just the whole thing embodies that sort of self-deprecating sarcasm that sort of finds nobility in humor about itself while moving past it. It's just like the way it's presented is just brilliant, in my opinion. So I would recommend that movie for sure.
Okay, so you recommended me a book and a movie, Testament of Hope, and what was the movie?
Moscow Does Not
Moscow.
Allow Tears.
Okay, thank you. That's all I had to ask.
Excellent.
All right, thank you.
My pleasure, brother. Well, I'm glad I could help. All right, everybody.
All right. Have a
That's
good night.
gonna wrap. Thanks, brother. That's gonna wrap it up for us for tonight. I will look, I'm really interested now on looking into what's happening in Sudan. So get ready for next week. I'm gonna start talking about that. Thank you. Oh, before we go, I almost forgot. Mac Williams, thank you for the 10, brother. Tell us why abstaining from the upcoming bourgeois elections in the U.S. is important to communists in the current historical context. That's a great question, and one I get somewhat frequently. Look, every 4 years, the ruling class pretends that we have democracy in this country, when what we really have is a bourgeois dictatorship, right? We have democracy for their class and dictatorship against us. In the 21st century, and in the 2020s specifically, it is becoming more and more impossible to pretend that this illusion they give us and call us democracy is anything but an increasingly brutal dictatorship and the stripping of all of our freedoms, including the ones that Americans hold most sacred. And so I believe that rather than sort of lend credence to this system, that boycotting this election can send a message to the ruling class and to our fellow working class people that it's time, that enough is enough, that nobody believes in this sham anymore. I think really that's all there is to it. If such a thing happened, well, each of the bourgeois parties are telling us this is the most important election of our lifetime, that Donald Trump or Kamala Harris are going to suspend democracy, which we already don't have. If that were to happen, not only would it be super
based,
but it would be a blow against the legitimacy of the state in an era that absolutely is defined by the crumbling of the legitimacy of the state. Meaning it would be another weapon against the ruling class. And we need as many of those as we can get. Thank you, everybody, for all your calls, all your comments. Thank you for the super chats. We'll see you next Monday. Have a great week, everybody.
Stand up, all victims of oppression, for the tyrants fear your might. Don't cling so hard to your possessions, for you have nothing if you have no right. Let racist ignorance be ended, for respect makes the empires fall. Freedom is merely privilege extended, unless enjoyed by one and all. So come, brothers and sisters, for the struggle carries on. The International unites the world in the song. So comrades, come rally, for this is the time and place. The international ideal unites the human race. Let no one build walls to divide us, walls of hatred nor walls of stone. Come greet the dawn and stand beside us. We'll live together or we'll die alone. In our world poisoned by exploitation, those who have taken, now they must give. And end the vanity of nations, we've but one earth on which to live. So come, brothers and sisters, for the struggle carries on. The International unites the world in the song. So comrades, come rally, for this is the time and place. The nation of peace. We stand unbowed before their armor, we defy their guns and shields. When we fight, provoked by their aggression, let us be inspired by light and love. For though they offer us concessions, change will not come from above. So come, brothers and sisters, for the struggle carries on. The international unites the world in a song. So comrades, come rally, for this is the time and place